SiriusXM keeps truck drivers informed and entertained with coast to coast coverage across the US and Canada. Listen to what you love from anywhere on the road with 24/7 ad free music plus sports, news, talk, and comedy. Hear your favorites on every haul for just $6.06 a month. Sign up at SiriusXMFleet.com. Welcome to The Long Haul, the podcast dedicated to empowering small carriers and owner-operators to drive their business forward. I'm your host, Adam Wingfield, bringing you insights from industry leaders, real-world success stories, and strategies to help you navigate the road to profitability. Whether you're just getting started or looking to take your fleet to the next level, this is the show where trucking meets opportunity. So buckle up, it's time to go the distance. Well, welcome back, everybody, to an exciting episode of The Long Haul, brought to you by Freightways Playbook. I am your host, Adam Wingfield, and I'm excited today because we're going to talk specifically about a segment that sometimes don't get enough love. And the person that we're going to bring on today as our guest in this segment, her company has been doing it quite a long time, and she's got quite the story. And I'm super excited to bring her about and really kind of talk about the niches itself. And we're going to be talking about box trucks today. Yeah, we're going to talk about box trucks and kind of how to navigate through that and the successes and failures and all that good stuff and the grind and all that good stuff when it comes down to it. Today's guest that I wanted to bring to the fold today is a woman who's doing some amazing things with her company out of Illinois. And we're going to get the opportunity to kind of dig on into that really, really heavily today. But today I want to introduce you to the CEO of Moscoso Express, Elizabeth Moscoso. Welcome to the show today, Elizabeth.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much, Adam.
Well,
Nice to be here.
great to have you on. So let's start with the roots. Let's go all the way back. Tell me about your dad in 2004. Let's go back to then. Tell me a little bit about what happened in '04.
Exactly. In 2004, Hugo ended up obtaining a box truck and he ended up getting his start that way. He ended up having great clients that noticed and that he was a go getter, that he was a yes man, that he made sure that everything arrived on time. And no matter what, he made sure to get to those pickups, those deliveries, and get that document. So that originated there, and then slowly but surely, we ended up adding a few more clients, adding a few more units, went from the straight trucks into the tractor trailers, and here we are today.
So let's go back. You know, your dad he bought a box truck, and
Correct.
where did the customers come from? Did he just come in, buy a box truck, and all of a sudden the customers start banging on the door? Like, how did that go about?
No, I think the best way to do it is to have the client almost ready, if you will, and then roll forward with those decisions. So he had been driving and doing over the road type of movement,
Hmm.
so express in a van for quite a few years. And then he developed certain relationships. And then someone ended up reaching out to him and saying, "Hey, I notice your work ethic. I notice your rigor. I would like for you to be overseeing my shipments."
Hmm.
That created an opportunity right there. He ended up having a truck available, made sure all the relationships that needed to be there were appropriate, and he transitioned over from being a driver of express items to now a company owner and still moving to a certain degree express, last mile, first mile.
And you talk about, hey, I'm doing what I'm doing professional as a driver. Your dad was really, really professional, and somebody took note of his professionalism and focused on that. Was there any time during that he was just say, "Hey, I'm going to jump on a load board and kind of figure it out from that standpoint," or was always one of the things that he's trying to impress one particular customer, or what was the strategy?
So due to the time, it was very grassroots. So we're
Yeah.
talking about 2004, and at that time, I don't quite know if there were uh, load boards at that at that time. But what you can always fall back on is your work ethic and just word of mouth. Work ethic and word of mouth goes so far, and it's a referral, right? We have Google reviews that give you 5-star reviews right there, but
Hmm.
we also have even more trustworthy a fellow colleague in the industry that just knows of this individual that's doing a great job, really stands out, and that referral goes a long way too. So the power of the referral was used right there to get started.
Elizabeth, the first time I had the opportunity to kind of sit down and talk to you was in Chicago last year at a Journal of Commerce event where we was just sat on a panel and we just talked about, the niches, the intricacies of, operating on the spot market. What did you see growing up? As a little girl that made you want to carry the torch forward of getting your hands in the trucking.
I think it has a lot to do with the work ethic. It has a lot
Hmm.
to do with just knowing the fundamentals. Everything that we are using, the headset, the clothes, the mic that's in front of you, like all of that, the glasses, all of that, there was a trucker that moved it at some point. And there's someone that picked it up, someone that delivered it. The role that the truck driver holds in the ecosystem of life is so critical and important. Being able to be at the front seat of it, making sure that things get delivered appropriately, making sure that the policies that we have in place get get utilized. So the professionalism, the accuracy, the responsibility, all of that is really nice, and being able to be at the front seat of it all is very much an honor.
When did you make the decision that you was gonna jump in the front seat of Moscoso? Were you always in Moscoso, or did you, kinda journeyed off on your own? And when did you take the lead of that?
I've been in the background the whole time. So at all times we've been in the background. However, really front seat was a few years ago
Mhm.
when after COVID, we ended up having a great opportunity to market ourselves. So before COVID, constant clientele and the volume was just nonstop as we in if whoever was in the industry at that time, we felt it. It was just
Yeah.
constant volume. And then after that, it ended up presenting a great opportunity to have take a step back, reassess, and see how we wanted to launch forward, if you will. And that presented a great opportunity to market and go back out there. But officially, I believe it was in 2016 that officially we ended up making that change and that transition.
So let's get into it. Running a box truck company isn't easy, or final mile, however you want to kind of describe it. But I want to really talk about the box truck space because I want to make sure box trucks folks really get some light when it comes down to it. What are some of the toughest barriers that you had to push through in that 26-foot space? What are some of those barriers that you pushed through?
The importance of knowing your volume, knowing how much you can put in there,
Hmm.
understanding how you can make as much work with that limited space. So we're not talking a 53 foot, which is our cookie cutter, if you will, in the
Hmm.
industry. We're talking about a smaller, almost half, if you will,
Yeah.
depending on how small. Sometimes they're very requiring a CDLC or less, and sometimes they require all the way up to a CDLB, a bit larger. And so the ones that we have are CDLB. So the largest size of box truck, if you will, that can be on the roads. However, when the client ends up reaching out, they might be wondering, oh, can you move this truck full? However, we have to go through a little process of education, making sure that we review DIMS, weights, things of that nature, and make sure that at the end of the day, we don't just say yes, but we say yes to what we can commit to. And we're saying yes to 12 pallets, 14 if you rearrange them strategically.
Hmm.
And those are the type of things that we have to go into the movement knowing. Top of mind, front of the mind, if you will. When you go into the warehouse, you're going to be talking with the warehouse staff and be like, hey, we're going to rearrange this in a certain manner. Or maybe you have to consider stacking. We have to make sure that we reach out to the client before we take any action like that to make sure that it's okay with them and that they approve strapping the cargo securely, all of these fundamental things that are applicable across the industry. But really, if you're in the box truck space, you really want to make sure that we take that into consideration and plan before we go into the warehouse.
Now, before you get to that point, you're talking about getting inbound calls of people saying, "Hey, Moscoso Express, we have 14 pallets. Can you do it?" How did you get to the point where you got people making calls where if it wasn't you going out soliciting business, now you got people calling you? When did that pivot happen?
It's always been a rotating door. We always have people that are just eager to try out the service, eager to learn a little bit more. Word of mouth, I cannot stress that enough, really goes a long way. And putting ourselves out there, making sure that we attend these conferences where, like you and I met, and to attend these meetings as whoever our viewers are, they might be working at a warehouse. They know that their shipper needs a good carrier. They might be a shipper themselves. And so it's just different areas of the industry space, making sure that we make those connections and value them, because all connections in this space, in this industry, all kind of are tied together in some way, shape, or form. So word of mouth networking events are really key for us. We end up going and we really value the person to person aspects, especially in these most recent years. We want to make sure that we're going out, making sure that we meet the people that are making those decisions, whether it's the dispatcher that has potentially for the freight forwarder or for the broker or for the shipper, that individual that's in charge of giving the orders, making sure that we understand what are their needs, what do they prefer. Maybe that specific individual ends up speaking in terms of appointments, and they look at it as an appointment, and we should look at it like a truck full. So
Yeah.
it's just those unique aspects and understanding what the client really values.
So how have you been able to grow and scale in an area like O'Hare? Now let me take a step back before I even say, oh, the O'Hare space where you operate out of. But you're in a very unique place in the Chicago area, and you're in a place where it's it's got its good side, and it's definitely got a side where people kind of frown up. You're from the Elk Grove Village area, right? So
Correct.
talk a little bit about that because you see a lot of brokers that see Elk Grove, and they're like, oh no. We don't want to have nothing to do with Elk Grove Village. So kind of talk about that. What is that? How has that impacted your business?
There's definitely a lot of individuals in this space. So being located at the cornerstone of America, if you will, like we're at the crossroads, right? We are right in the middle of the whole US, West Coast, East Coast. We're also right next to the airport. We also have rail yards just really close to us too. So there's a lot of transportation just happening here locally. And with that, Elk Grove is also heavily dense in trucking and logistics and warehouses. We have some very nice and modern warehouses. We have some more on the older side of warehouses where you really have to be a really skilled driver to be able to back into certain docks like these. So I all I can say is it's all good things. Understanding your area, understanding your backyard really helps in these type of situations. So as someone that might be starting off, really understand your individual local market. It really helps elevate the game. Because from here, now we can go out to the regional locations. Maybe we're picking up from here, going out. Maybe we're coming back. But that facilitates all of those movements.
I love what you just said about knowing your backyard. Like, there's so many people that get in the trucking industry that buy a truck, buy a trailer, whatever that may looks like. And the very first thing that they do is they buy a subscription to the marketplace, which we call load boards, and that's how they operate their business to infinity and beyond. But you're saying the opposite, and you're speaking the language that is super important. You said, you know what? Understand what's going on around you, understand the opportunities, and get out in front of the open. That's the one thing that I can tell about you that is so inspirational is that you're always out in the front. Like you're everywhere with your niche. You're everywhere. You're out there, but then you're also the beneficiary of that labor that you're putting in as far as getting out in front and open. So I think that's really, really important to kind of hinge on.
Yes, and I think the type of team that we have and the type of team that we foster is very key to making that happen. So, although I might appear as a single person, just out in front of everyone and meeting people and in meetings and in this space, right now, our dispatch team is making sure that routes are being planned accordingly for tomorrow, going accordingly for today. Our drivers, very reliable individuals, they are making sure that they give a great customer service experience at each and every single warehouse, irrespective of wait time, irrespective of urgency that maybe the client is really wanting for this to get delivered. Understanding that we have to be empathetic, especially right now during this time of potential, especially being in the air freight space, the tariffs and customs
Yeah.
brokerages, it's going on a little bit. And so our driver team just being the front and center and face of it all too.
Nah, that's incredible. And how many do you have on the team right now when you mention a team?
So it varies between 30 to 40 of our team of drivers because of just market
Yeah,
flows and constant turnover,
sure.
but we have a very reliable fleet as well, given that we've been in business for so long. We have a nice steady rate of individuals that have been with us for so many years, some including 12 years with us. So, having been in business for
That's good.
21, that's quite a bit.
Wow, that's awesome. So Moscoso is proudly minority and woman owned. What's been your experience in navigating the industry from that perspective, and how have you been able to leverage those certifications, if you've been able to leverage them at all?
Yeah. The advantages come in your shippers primarily, and explaining it to even to your clients, so whether it's brokers or freight forwarders, explaining it to them to know, hey, just for awareness, this business is it falls under these categories, and then individuals that might be needing it for certain requirements that they also have, certain funding, especially from the government, requires certain use of companies that fall under these categories, so making sure that people know it has played its support, and we have long-standing contracts with certain companies that vouch for supporting companies as such. So it's been beneficial for us.
You know, you take another interesting approach too, from your standpoint, and you're hitting a lot of boxes that a lot of people miss. You made reducing emissions and environmental impact a priority, and most people would think that that's just an initiative for big companies, like blah blah, like who cares? But you've proved it's possible for small carriers too. What made you take that leap?
Yes, in 2019, our telematics really increased. It has a lot to do with how the technology has advanced in this field throughout the years. So when we started, having a truck was awesome, having it be run efficiently was great. And then through the years, the computers on these trucks have just evolved to become
Yeah.
so smart. And we're really trying to tap into that, really get to know what can we see. And also just being in tune with the climate. We're moving towards a more sustainable environment. We want to make sure that for generations to come, trucking isn't looked at in a negative light, but rather a fellow contributor that's also working towards practicing sustainably. Whatever that means and however we get there, we want to make sure that we're part of the solution. And so in 2019 is when we really took a very strong approach to it. Most recently, we also looked into what type of fuel is being provided at the nearby fuel stations. We
Mhm.
found out that one of the fuel stations was providing biodiesel. And we said, you know what? We'll study this. We did a little study on it, and we realized that yes, this is very much, not only is it healthier for the environment, it also aligns with our practices of quick fueling, and it's on the path. So why not just make that commitment to it as well?
So, you know, you've also grown the business through strong partnerships. In your experience, what separates a partnership that works from one that becomes, hey, you know what, this partnership is it's just a liability.
You can imagine that in the number of years that we've been in business, we've seen a bit of both. So
Yeah, I can
we
imagine.
have to, yeah, we really have to see what is the objective of the other side, of the other party. Are we here to collaboratively work together? Or are they more of just a, hey, I need this to be delivered and I don't really mind who is there doing it. So we look into all of those. And then we also have unfortunately seen individuals who, and I say individuals, but I mean companies, right? These are all full teams. And their business practices, their business culture, it maybe doesn't align with the way that we like ethically and our core principles, if you will. And
Mhm.
so we have to separate ways, and there are certain areas and times, and we assess them and we have meetings. This is never a one and sudden item. But whenever you end up making any type of partnership, you want to make sure that the individual on the other side, even just to join into a meeting, right? Into this, we want to make sure that we both see things eye to eye and can continue on for the longevity of it. And we've been very fortunate because we have seen partners that do value the efforts that one does. Sometimes you're sitting there and you're like, why do I have so many policies on all these things? Well, GDP is something that's very important, and therefore they value that. Semicon is very important and therefore they value. So all of these rigorous documenting procedures maybe that we're going through that at some point some individuals might not have it as top priority, but others do. And again, it just goes back to our drivers as well. Our drivers understanding the importance of following procedures, following these protocols, even though in the moment it might not seem as important.
That's a great perspective, and I want to shift a little bit. We're going to take those relationships piece and kind of pivot it through where I really want to kind of talk in terms of practice for small guys and ladies out here that want to start a box truck company. And I want to take back and look at one of your approaches, specifically around approaching a shipper. Okay, so when you're talking to a shipper for the first time, what's your approach? How do you pitch your company in a way that actually gets Moscoso Express in the door?
It's very important to understand what is it that they need. So every company has a need. Whether they realize it or not, every company has a need. That need might be getting fulfilled by another carrier right now, but they might have sudden miscellaneous needs. Maybe they always have a daily run that they have and it goes from Chicago to Indianapolis and that's a lane, it's already fulfilled, their capacity is full. However, explaining to that individual that you exist and then that making sure that they understand that if suddenly they have a sudden need for anything that's outside of that. Now, what could be outside of that and making sure that that dialogue exists. They might say, you know what, we always do this lane. Well, now that you've asked, we do have surges in the summer months, right before the
Mhm,
summer months, because we have some lawn chairs that have to go and get delivered. Okay, great.
mhm.
Now you know that we exist. And then when you have that surplus in capacity needs, we are right just a phone call away or an email away. Just let us know and we can quote proactively. So that way we have a rate in place. You call us, we'll run it. Another thing can also be some companies don't have too much foresight. So large warehouses might have an ability to see, okay, here in Q2, we're going to be having XYZ shipments occur throughout the month and these weeks and these dates. But other shippers that are maybe potentially smaller or not, they might not have as much foresight. So being able to extend the an olive branch, if you will,
Yeah.
that will inform them, hey, you might have a sudden express shipment that might come out that you might not know about, and you might have a client that calls in an emergency as well. So their client needs an emergency. You can be that relief for them just by saying, hey, just give me a call. I'll see what I can do and we'll try to get it in.
So when you think about helping the next one up, and I think that, there are so many people that, got into trucking as a whole during COVID, as you know. But then more importantly, a lot of people got into trucking, especially with box trucks, because it was a lower barrier entry. It was a little, cheaper. It was a kind of a gateway into some individuals felt it was a gateway into the industry. With that in place, what's one piece of advice you wish someone you gave you before you got started? Just so from a box truck perspective, what would be one of those things that you would tell someone right now that wanted to start a company and buy a bunch of box trucks? Not like 40 like you got, but like what would you how would you advise them? Somebody wants to get started, what would be the advice you would give them?
The best advice is know your numbers.
I
And I
heard that
think you're
before.
very big on that one as well. So, the best advice, understand what impacts your bottom line and understand what are your fixed expenses and what are your variable expenses. So, fixed expense might be insurance, variable expense might be fuel. If you're running a lot and your truck is moving all day, a lot of fuel consumption. If you're not, if you're doing more potentially local movements, you're waiting more at warehouses, fuel consumption is less. And also, don't forget to include there your time because, especially in very competitive markets, if I'm the only one that's overseeing myself, then I have to make sure that I cover fuel, I have to cover truck payments, if any, and mm, then I might not be factoring in my time. So make sure that we include all of those aspects once you're interested in looking into it. And then if there's enough of a business case, if there's enough of a business need, if you see enough opportunity even, then by all means go for it. But one of the big things to understand is when a client says, "Yes, I want to start using you. You're going to be a great addition to the team." What does that quantitatively mean? So it's great that they're saying that. It's great that they have that need.
Mhm.
What does that numerically mean? Does that mean that I'm going to have a run Sunday through Saturday? Or does that mean that I'm going to have a run once a month? Or what does that commitment look like?
But what about the ones that are not in the metropolitan space? They don't have, air freight shipper opportunities in their backyards. You got somebody in rural Mississippi that wants to start a trucking company and wants to start with box trucks. I mean, it's not the same type of approach. So, what would you say to something of that caliber if somebody was in those particular spots?
What I would say is that although it might appear as less, you actually have more. There are potentially maybe not as many trucking companies as we have here in Elk Grove, being a metro area. There might not be as much competition that you have going and approaching these other warehouses that might be off the highway, very much off the highway in manufacturing. So now you have a really key opportunity to be that unique factor, that unique individual, that unique company that's approaching and saying, "Hey, I'm going to bring something new, reliable, and good." What does good mean? I'm going to be on time to my pickups, on time to my deliveries. And I think that's the value of someone that's new to the space. They're new to the space. They're coming in with all this energy. They are very much
Mhm.
interested. They want to perform
Mhm.
the best and give the best service. And I know that shippers appreciate that.
One thing that you mentioned in the beginning, and I think that's important. It kind of glazed over, but I think it's important is you're inside the truck. The things that you have is really really important to help you with the service that you provide. So if you got a box truck, having a pallet jack, making sure that you have a pallet jack, making sure you have E-track straps, make sure that if in some cases if you have the bulkheads where you can removable bulkheads where you can use that to go ahead and separate the shipment itself. And then another thing, Elizabeth, that I tell people that are in the box truck space and they may not have, direct freight. They may just be, running spot freight. I tell them always make sure that you or your driver has a tape measure and always taking pictures. And because the reason why I say that, you talked about pallets and you talked about that a little bit earlier. But the most important thing that you can do in a box truck or a hot shot or any other matter when it comes down to that space, because we're talking about being in the LTL space, which is the less than truckload space. The best thing that you can do to maximize your revenue is maximize utilization. You want to make sure that if that truck has got 6 extra feet or 8 extra feet, or you can put 700 more pounds, 100 more pounds, or 800 more pounds, that you are aware of your limitations within that truck. You talked about it a little bit a minute ago too. You said dimensions. Make sure you have your DIMS in place, and that's those things that we're talking about. But if you're going to start a trucking company, or if you're running a box truck right now, and you're running partials and you don't have, those things that we talked about, and you're not measuring and you're not making sure that you take care of every single bit of space that you can possibly do, then you're doing yourself a disservice. Wouldn't you agree?
I couldn't agree more with you. Everything that you were saying, I was like, "Yep." Um, that's exactly it, and you really have to make sure that you understand. Now this goes into the quality aspects. Understand at what point you end up receiving the cargo. What we do as part of our procedures is we take pictures of every single thing that goes into our truck and everything that gets delivered. So that way, in one way, even if we don't get the exact super close angle or corner, we at least have a very general view of the condition that we're delivering and picking up this cargo. So that way, if there's any questions, we have that as proof. Now, in addition to that, we also have better understanding, especially in the LTL space, of what
Mhm,
cargo we picked up for which client.
mhm.
Are we labeling it properly? Are we making sure that all the barcodes align? So being very attentive to detail is really key in this space because you're not dealing with FTL, which is like the full truck is going
Right.
to be filled with one client's cargo. Now in this space, we're talking about potentially compiling a few delivery locations, a few pickup locations, and
Hmm.
being strategic about it. Having a pallet jack really helps and being able to understand, okay, if I'm going to be picking this up and delivering this somewhere else, but I have another pickup halfway through, how do I rearrange my cargo proactively so that way when they get to the delivery location, I don't have to be causing an inconvenience, or some locations they won't touch the
They won't
cargo
touch
as
it.
well.
Yeah.
Mhm.
No, I think that's a good point. And you talk about making sure that you rearrange cargo and making sure that you're doing exactly what the customer needs are and being careful on how you stack that stuff in there. So, what mistake would you say that you made in this business that you look back on and say, you know what, this turned out to be my best learning moment ever? What would be that mistake?
I have many because
Which
that's what
all
happens when
successful
you're
entrepreneurs do.
exactly, exactly. And I think that is the way to see it too. We have great learning opportunities. It's never that I did anything wrong. It's always that I did something else that helps me get to improve. And so I would end up saying, I think the bottom line, understanding your bottom line, that has come in very key. Understanding the type of relationships that you have with your clients and understanding how they see the relationship. So, is this a partnership that even in the spot markets, for example, or spot
Mhm.
markets, all of a sudden your rates are going up, your rates are going down, are we staying steady with them though? Because we have fixed rates with them and they are reliable because they give you continuous cargo? Or are these more of spot market clients where they reach out to you and they will give you spot rates? So understanding that differentiation also helps for you at the end of the day to quote appropriately. If your client, if you notice that the client is more of that fixed rate client, respect that because that really helps, especially in these type of market conditions. If the client is more of a spot market client, then we want to make sure that we end up quoting appropriately. Don't leave anything on the table. Really try to make sure that if they also align with spot market rates, that you receive spot market prices too.
So for someone out there that's running 2 or 3 trucks, still doing everything by hand, old-fashioned way, what's the first tech move you tell them to make, just that will really change the game as a 2, 3 truck operator?
Uh, GPS. So understand where your truck is located at all times, irrespective of someone being able to pick up a phone call.
Mhm.
So there's many times, especially in weather conditions, that maybe the driver has to really stay focused. If it's really, we're talking about Chicago area, a little bit more on the north side, if we're having a very strong snowy season, the driver has to be really beeline focused on that drive and be really seeing the what the weather conditions are. Make sure that you are still able to have visibility though by having a GPS. And then in addition to that, automating whatever you can, standardizing. So one key benefit to the way that we end up communicating with our clients is we have a standard way of communicating. So it's never just what we decide to type in. Maybe I'm really
Mhm.
tired. I'm going to say arrived. Maybe I'm
Yeah,
really energetic and I'm going to say, dear client, like it's been a great
yeah.
trip and I did all
Mhm.
this and I've shown up. So having a standardized way of communicating, it really helps as well. And it helps you stand out.
So, another thing I think is really interesting is that a lot of people think that freight is freight. I buy a box truck or I buy a semi. If I got a box truck, I should expect to see the same grosses every week as I see on a semi truck, which we know that that's not necessarily the case. The realities of running at box trucks is a whole different ball game. What are the hidden challenges people don't talk about when starting starting a trucking company as a box truck owner? What are the hidden challenges they don't talk about?
I think understanding your niche,
Yeah.
understanding the area, the sector that you really, really help in. So,
Mhm.
we potentially, with our straight trucks, are not the best for the consistent volume of maximizing the truck space, right? Maybe it's not an FTL 26 feet of freight
Right.
type of cargo, but we do help out with more, for example, express urgent, more auto parts, aerospace, more liftgate utility needs. So while we don't go into the space, but residential, for example, or the space that we do go into with lift gates, especially, is hospitals, going into certain areas. So, understanding what are the possibilities of freight. And again, friendly reminder, freight moves everything. So, there's an opportunity out there. We just have to learn what they are, what straight trucks primarily are able to benefit from, and how to navigate the space to get in.
So 21 years in business. What is if you was to have a crystal ball and look at year 30, what do you see different at year 30 for Moscoso Express than you see in 2025?
Much more automation. Automation is here, it's not going anywhere. AI is here, it's not going anywhere. So it's all about how we integrate those tools into our operations, because we always want to stay ahead of the ball, ahead of the game, and we want to really, really know what is it that we can add and value to our clients without them even having to ask. So if we're at the forefront of it all, they will appreciate the value add. But again, relationships and speaking with the
Mhm.
clients, understanding what is it that they really value and need, and providing that.
What are you doing in 2025 just as a proactive? Is there any specific technology or is there any specific automations that you are using? Are there any specific AI functionality that you're using right now for Moscoso Express?
We integrate AI and tech and automations in everything that we do. Whether it's route analysis. So we were talking about LTL space. We have to do quite a bit of picking up and delivering of cargo throughout. And that uses technology, that uses automation, that uses AI. So we're end up using all of these key features when we're looking into route optimization. How long does my driver typically take at this facility? How quickly do they typically get from point A to point B at 3 a.m. versus 3 p.m.? What are the warehouse operating hours that I can maximize? So you ended up hitting a very important thing of route of truck utility, asset utility. So we want to maximize that truck, and we want to keep it on the road, keep its wheels turning. If it's driving, if it's moving, it's making money, if in a way. So we want to really maximize that. So using all the tools that we have to incorporate into that optimization of utility is going to help us be able to also provide lower rates. Our client at the end of the day is going to be happier, and we're going to stay competitive.
Now, how do you balance that long-term vision with the day-to-day the day-to-day hustle of just trying to keep freight moving? I mean, because as a CEO, you've got to be a visionary. You're a visionary of, you got 40 people that are on staff.
Mm.
You're the visionary, so you're talking about automations and things like that downstream. Like, so how do you balance that with, hey, how are we going to get these freight bills paid?
It's all about strategizing and laying it out and putting a time on the calendar. That's what it's all about.
That
And
calendar.
being yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Just being observant of what days are peak volume. So maybe on a Monday morning, I'm not going to strategize an AI meeting,
Mhm.
but maybe on a Tuesday or Wednesday that are a bit lower in volume, that we can strategize. Also, look at the times. Our For our team, we end up trying to primarily deliver in the morning and pick up in the evening time. So looking at all those workflows really
Mhm.
maximizes that.
Now, you also talked about AI. What specifically, if you can get granular and just what
Mhm.
specifically you use in AI? What is AI doing at Moscoso Express? If there was one function that you use that for, what system are you using it specifically for, and what process does it help you solve?
I don't mean to be so generic, but we literally use it for everything.
Really?
Everything that you can think
Yeah.
of. So, my truck is throwing this check engine light, and my ELD is giving me this telematics report
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
the engine oil pressure. Is
Right.
this oil pressure really dangerous, or is it not? ChatGPT, there you go. AI is telling you, well, due to weather, and include weather conditions, right? Because you never know.
Mhm.
Well, this can be coming up because of just the cold temperatures. In cold temperatures, oil is a little bit more, not as viscous. It's a little bit more viscous. It's not as fluid.
Yeah.
And so, therefore, there you go. That is just one. little example of so many ways that we can use it. And especially as an owner, as a truck driver, we want to make sure that we keep our trucks on the road. So we want to make sure that we send it to the shop when necessary. And if we have these questionable items, we can always have a, by no means is it a mechanic, but a friendly idea to bounce ideas. So a friendly person to bounce ideas with.
But that brings me to an interesting point because I was talking to a few folks down at the Mid American Truck Show, and when I look at the industry as a whole, and you look at how highly computerized trucks are, we talked about that a little bit earlier in the show today. But when you look at the complexity that is involved in diagnosing, issues when it comes down to the truck, and because it's so highly computerized, we have to think differently when it comes down to the mechanical side of maintenance. Because no longer, as I remember, man, back in, you go back in 2010, 2011, and you just go back, about 15 years ago or so, and how many different checks that you would get hit with because they're trying to diagnose the problem. They're gonna charge you labor hours so we can check this, and then when we figure out it's not this, then we're gonna try this, and then when we figure out there's not this, then we're gonna try that. All of that adds up to maintenance that you've gotta pay for. But you talked about AI, and I wouldn't be surprised, and you would be really, really dismissed on how the future works to think that that's not gonna change. To think that, and I'm not saying mechanics are gonna go away, and by no means, so don't even try to read between the lines, users on this call. I'm not saying that a physical mechanic will go by the wayside. But you think about the high complexity of the computerization of units these days. You think about the unrealistic level of intelligence that AI has. When you have AI telling these computers and they're talking to each other, and then the AI say, okay, hey, here's your problem. This is what you need to fix this because of this. We should see a reduction of downtime. We should see a reduction of diagnostic time. We should see a reduction of diagnostic fees to the drivers. And that's when I say that AI may not necessarily be a bad thing as long as it's implemented correctly, as long as implemented to where it's beneficial to the greater good. And in this situation, if you got an AI that can read a computer and it can a basic diagnostic and give that tech, hey, here's the part you need, use this wrench, turn it 3 times, and let's get this guy out of here. I think that that's where we need to go as a future when it comes to artificial intelligence.
Exactly. And something as for my truck owners out there, something as simple as like what truck brand or what tires should I get? Should I
Yeah.
get XYZ, ABC? Putting it in there. What are for my road conditions? What type of driving do you do? Do you go
Mhm.
local? Do you go regional? So as you said, Ed, I'm pairing all that up because by no means are we ever going to end up not needing mechanics. Please, if anything, more people go into that field.
Yeah, yeah.
But there, it's a nice pairing for our drivers, for our dispatch, for our clients, our mechanics, everyone in the space.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Now, before we get out of here, yeah, yeah, I like to part with this. We call this podcast the long haul for a reason. It's more about than just freight. It's more about just, hey, how do I do this? Or listening to an episode like this and gaining insights from someone such as yourself. What does that phrase long haul mean to you personally as someone who's built a business to where it is now, to where you want to take it? So what does that mean for you?
The long haul for me means making sure that we do what is necessary to make sure that we're here for the long haul. Make sure that we're here for many years to come. I look forward to talking with you here 20 years down the line, seeing where we are, hitting that 2030 mark and coming up and seeing if my prognosis is right or way off. Maybe there's going to be another technology that comes in and just really invigorates the space. I can tell you that had we had this talk in 2004 and 2012, I would have never guessed that something like AI was even around the corner. So we never know what's coming around the corner again for us in the future.
No, that's a great point. We never know. No, we would have never known 2024 would have been the year of AI. That's when AI really kind of just blew up in the real world, and we would have never known that. But it's important, like you said, a few minutes ago. You mentioned you grab the technology, but you got to embrace your future and don't be resistant to it. A lot of times you find, especially in this industry, we're so resistant to technology that we're antiquated in technology. We're still signing bill of ladings with a pen and submitting it to a factoring company, making sure that all the corners like, man, we're so antiquated because we're so resistant to technology developments. And and there's reasons behind it, right? There's trust that's been broken across this industry for quite some time, and there's reasons why. But I think what I'm impressed by what you're doing is that you're in your space, which is that LTL niche. You've created a business model within that niche that has flourished, and you've done that with grit, with grind, and always focusing on forward proofing the business. And I think that that's one of the reasons why y'all have been in business for 21 years plus now. So thank you for joining us today, Elizabeth. I wish massive success to Moscoso Express. I remember when we sat on the panel and I heard the what we talked about. How you went about the business side of it, the thought and ideology on the operation side. I knew that you had a successful operation through that, and I'm glad we were able to share some of that today.
Thank you, Adam, for the time, and hope everyone that's listening and enjoys and goes through this market with all the positivity and rigor and optimism that we can.
You talked about it. You create the market, right? The market doesn't create you. You create the market. You determine that market, and you're going to have cycles. You're going to have up and downs with any market. It doesn't matter what market you're in. You're going to have ups and downs. You look at the stock market. I mean, it's hopping down like popcorn right now. I mean, any market that you get into is going to have its highs and its lows. It really just kind of boils down to you as the owner and you as that person that really drives it forward. So thank you again, Elizabeth, for joining us today. Listen, for those that are listening, please make sure that you go like, share, subscribe, share this out to 5, 10 people. If anybody ever asks you about what you should do about box trucks, make sure you share this episode out because this episode was really about establishing a niche within being in a box truck space, understanding what that niche needs to look like, and really capitalizing. So thanks again, Elizabeth. And thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Long Haul. We're looking forward to seeing you on the next episode. Take care, and we'll see you again.